The gold was real. You could hold it, weigh it, run it through an assay, and it came back as real gold. There was just one problem. It had not come from the rock they said it came from. For 3 years, a mining company reported one of the richest gold strikes in history, and the proof was being mixed into the samples. This is the story of how, in the end, the metal itself gave it away. The company was Bre-X, a tiny Canadian outfit that, on the strength of drill results from a patch of Borneo jungle called Busang, grew to be worth around $6 billion. It claimed a deposit of up to 70 million ounces of gold, the biggest anyone had ever seen. And then, over a few weeks in 1997, it went to nothing. There was no gold. Every fraud is a clock. This one started ticking with the very first tampered sample in 1994. And the strangest part of the whole story is how it ended. A $6 billion fraud, and not one person was ever convicted of it. This is how the gold lied, and the one test that nobody insisted on. Bre-X belonged to a Calgary promoter named David Walsh, and for years it was close to worthless. In 1993, on the advice of a geologist named John Felderhoff, it picked up the rights to Busang for around $80,000. The man Felderhoff put on the ground to run the drilling was a talented field geologist named Michael de Guzman. Then the samples started coming back extraordinary, 3 grams of gold per ton, 4 and climbing, and the estimated size of the deposit climbed with them. 30 million ounces, then more, then 70. Felderhoff talked about 30 million plus. The stock went from pennies to hundreds of dollars. The company was worth billions, and Canada's biggest pension funds bought in. There is a standard way to prove a strike like this, and the way Bre-X skipped it is the whole story. You drill a core, a long cylinder of rock, and you split it down the middle. You send one half to the lab to be assayed, and you keep the other half. That archived half is the whole point. It's the evidence, the thing any independent geologist can pull years later, re-examine and retest. Trust with a copy kept. Bre-X didn't keep the other half. It crushed the entire core for assay. The reason given sounded technical. The gold was patchy. You needed the whole sample to measure it. What it actually did was quieter and far more important. It destroyed the one thing that could ever disprove the result, and it created the exact moment between the rock and the lab where something could be added. So where did the gold in those samples actually come from? From a river. Over about 2.5 years, panned river gold was bought from local miners and blended into the crushed rock before it reached the lab. The deposit was being built by hand, one sprinkled sample at a time, and that, not an auditor, not a regulator, is what would eventually give it away, because river gold and rock gold are not the same metal. Gold that forms inside hard rock is angular, sharp-edged, locked into the minerals around it. Gold that has tumbled down a river for thousands of years is rounded, worn smooth. It even loses a little silver from its surface as it travels, leaving a thin, darker gold skin over a paler core. The two look different under a microscope. One is born in stone, the other has been on a long journey. The gold in the Busang samples was rounded. It had the skin. Under a lens, the metal carried the signature of a river, not that hill, a tell that, read correctly, pointed away from the deposit. Some geologists did examine the grains and saw they looked wrong. But de Guzman always had an answer ready, an unproven theory about gold settling out of a volcanic pool. It sounded just plausible enough. And to truly check it, you would have wanted the other half of the core, the archived half that, here, did not exist. The one question that could have ended it early was never forced. Not do you trust them, but show me the rock again. Then someone drilled the hole again. In early 1997, Bre-X finally took on a serious partner to build the mine, the American miner Freeport-McMoRan. And Freeport did the one thing the whole core method had quietly prevented for years. It drilled its own holes, twinned. A meter or two from Bre-X's richest ground, the same rock. The results came back between 1/100th and 8/100ths of a gram per ton. Background noise. Bre-X's holes in that same ground had reported 3 and 4 grams and more. On the 19th of March, 1997, as that gap was surfacing, Michael de Guzman, the geologist who had overseen the sampling, was flying by helicopter to meet the Freeport team. He fell from the helicopter over the jungle. His death was ruled a suicide. The circumstances have been argued over ever since. He was the one person who might have explained the samples, and he was gone. A few weeks later, An independent firm called Strathcona delivered the verdict. The Busang samples had been tampered with on a scale and with a precision that was, in their words, without precedent in the history of mining anywhere in the world. There was no economic gold deposit at Busang. There never had been. The richest gold strike in history had only ever existed in the assays. So who answered for it? Almost no one, and that is the most uncomfortable part of the story. $6 billion in value evaporated, from a stock worth billions to about 6 cents a share in a matter of weeks. The losers were ordinary. Canada's pension funds were among the worst hit. The fund for the province's teachers lost around $100 million, and others lost tens of millions more. Some 40,000 investors held the stock. A class action ground on until 2014 and recovered so little that the money left over was simply given to charity because there was too little to divide. And the men at the top, David Walsh, the founder, was never charged with anything. He died of a brain aneurysm in the Bahamas in 1998. John Felderhoff, the chief geologist, who had sold about $84 million of stock before the collapse, was charged by the securities regulator, and after one of the longest trials in the province's history, was acquitted on every count. The judge found he had reasonably believed the gold was real, and de Guzman, the one man tied to the sampling, was already dead. So a $6 billion fraud produced exactly 0 convictions for fraud. The police closed their investigation without charges. The tampering was real. The losses were real, and in the eyes of the law, no one had done it. The fraud that nobody was convicted for did change one thing. It rewrote the rule book. After Bre-X, Canada brought in a new standard called 43101 that forces a named qualified independent person to stand behind the resource numbers a mining company publishes. The hole that nobody made Bre-X drill is now, in a sense, required by law. Could it have been caught earlier? That is genuinely argued. Afterwards, Strathcona listed the warning signs. But the judge who acquitted Felderhoff found the tampering so sophisticated that it would have been difficult to uncover at the time, and that the red flags were not as obvious as the regulator had claimed. Both of those are true at once. The clue was real, the metal had the wrong shape, and it was easy to explain away, right up until the moment someone drilled the hole next door. Reports can be forged, spreadsheets can be cooked, experts can be honestly wrong, but the metal could not lie about where it came from. The gold was real. It had simply come from a river, not a rock, and the only test that ever mattered was the one no one insisted on. You can fake the paper. You can't fake the rock if you let someone check it. 9 frauds, 1 clock, money, a phone call, code, a machine, a signature, a coin that was only a number, a profit that was never cash, a risk dressed up as arbitrage, and now gold that came from the wrong place. The thing they ask you to believe in keeps changing. The clock never does. There's always a next one. Thanks for watching Quiet Loops.